Hey everyone, welcome to the Zone of Tech. I'm Daniel, and welcome to my final Leaks and Rumors series. The series in which I discuss in detail everything you need to know about an upcoming device. And in my previous episodes, I covered quite a lot of things. The iPhone 7, the Samsung Galaxy S7, the LG G5, and the iPhone 6c / the iPhone 5 SE. So in case you missed the previous episodes and you want to check those out as well, I left all of these linked in the description box down below, by the way. And in this video, I'll be covering something that's not actually a phone. In this episode, I'll be covering the upcoming iPad Air 3. Enjoy. Okay, so there's quite a lot of things to talk about when it comes to the iPad Air 3. The iPad Air 2 was and still is one of the best tablets ever made. It had an amazing design, really premium, also really thin and light. The display was again one of the best ones out there, and with the iPad Air 2 it was finally laminated, and then it also came with a really fast Apple A8X chip, along with 2GB of RAM, both of these making the iPad Air 2 one of the fastest tablets out there. And speaking of the iPad Air 2, I've done a really in-depth review on that, so in case you want to check that out, I left it linked in the description box down below. But yeah, in terms of the iPad Air 2, there was literally nothing to complain about. Great design, amazing performance, amazing display, hey, you even had a great camera on a tablet. Touch ID, a ridiculously long battery life, thin, light, portable, and a huge app selection. The iPad Air 2 seems like the perfect tablet, and it pretty much was. And every single year since the iPad 1's announcement, they released a brand new tablet. Except for 2012, when they released the iPad 3 and the iPad 4. But the iPad Air 2 came out in 2014. In 2015, we've only seen an iPad Pro and an iPad Mini 4. We haven't seen an iPad Air 3. So how is the iPad Air 3 going to improve on a product that already seems perfect? Well, there's quite a lot of ways. First off, in terms of the design, the first iPad was really thick. And with the iPad 2, Apple reinvented the design so it was much thinner and lighter than before. With the iPad 3 and 4, they kind of moved backwards just because they had to include a much larger battery that could sustain that Retina display. So yeah, both the iPad 3 and the iPad 4 were thicker and heavier than the iPad 2. So that's why they had to release the iPad Air. Brand new design, chamfered edges, this thing looked insane. It was also much thinner and lighter than the iPad 4. And surprisingly, with the iPad Air 2, even though everyone, including myself, we were all expecting to see an S model, well, we actually saw a brand new design. Well, still the same design, but much thinner and lighter than before. Improved cameras, improved display. The display was now finally laminated. But yeah, that S model is finally coming with the iPad Air 3 now. So we're actually not expecting to see any new design with the iPad Air 3. So it's still going to have the exact same design that the iPad Air 2 had, with some really small differences. First off, it's actually going to be a bit thicker than before. So the iPad Air 2 came at 6.10mm thick, and now the iPad Air 3 is going to come at 6.15. So yeah, not a huge difference, only a 0.05mm thickness increase. And it's also going to be just a bit wider by 0.1mm. Now, I know that these are some really small differences. Most cases will fit just fine, especially the ones from Apple, since they're made out of leather and leather scratches. However, some tighter cases which worked with the iPad Air 2 might not work with a 3, so you might need some new ones. But yeah, because of these, just like Apple did with the iPhone 6s, they're also going to release a brand new smart case and a brand new smart cover. And there have been quite a lot of leaked designs, schematics, and even cases for the iPad Air 3, all of which confirm this really similar iPad Air 2 design, along with some really small thickness changes. And this was pretty much everything in terms of the design, not a lot of changes. Okay, now moving on to section number 2, we have the display. Now, there have been quite a lot of rumors that suggest that the iPad Air 3 is actually coming with a 4K display. Now, to be honest, I personally don't believe these rumors to be true, just because Apple's flagship tablet, the iPad Pro, well, that one doesn't come with a 4K display. So even though a 4K display seems awesome, it's not that likely that we're going to see a 4K display. Most likely we're going to see the exact same display as on the iPad Air 2. So 9.7-inch 2048 by 1536 resolution display at 264 ppi. Now we're most likely going to see an increase in both the contrast and the brightness. Now a pretty big improvement when it comes to the iPad Air 3's display is going to be this one, dynamic refresh rate. So what does dynamic refresh rate mean? Well, it means that the refresh rate won't be locked at 60 Hz. So when you're not doing anything on a display, if you're just looking at the home screen, for example, the iPad Air 3 would actually lower the refresh rate to something like 20 or 15 Hz, or even lower, like 5. And this will have a huge impact when it comes to the power consumption. So just because of this, we might see an increase in the battery life from 10 hours to something like 12 or even 15 hours. But more about the battery life in a different section. But a dynamic refresh rate doesn't actually mean just lowering the refresh rate, it also means increasing the refresh rate when needed. But more about that soon. Now you might be aware that the iPhone 6s's display has a pretty unique feature called 3D Touch. So on the iPhone 6s, the display can actually feel the pressure of your touch. So if you press hard enough on the display, you get to this second touch level, which allows you to do things like quick viewing an email or some app shortcuts and more. So that's pretty cool, even though it's not that useful in real life. But the question is, are we going to get 3D Touch in the iPad Air 3? And the answer is no. Apple is indeed working on a larger scale, pressure-sensitive display panel, but apparently they're having quite a lot of trouble producing so many 9.7-inch 3D Touch display panels. And because of that, because of these production issues, we won't be seeing a 3D Touch display in the iPad Air 3 only next year in the iPad Air 4, and hopefully in the iPad Pro 2 this year. Let me know, by the way, in the comment section down below, how many of you have an iPhone 6s, and how many of you think 3D Touch is useful, and how many of you actually use 3D Touch on a daily basis. Definitely let me know. Okay, so this was the display. Now moving on to section number 3, we have the specs. So in terms of the specs, the iPad Air 2 came with the Apple A8X chip. Yeah, that's a pretty weird name, pretty difficult to pronounce, but it was pretty powerful. The performance on that thing was just insane. It never lagged, it never stuttered. Games ran insane, and with every single iPad we've seen an improved version of the chip that we've seen in the iPhone. So with the iPhone 6, we had the Apple A8 chip, and with the iPad Air 2, we had the Apple A8X chip. With the iPhone 6s, we had the Apple A9 chip, and with the iPad Air 3, we're expecting an Apple A9X chip. But the interesting thing here is that we already have an Apple A9X chip. We have it in the iPad Pro, and that processor is just insane. Just to give an idea of how powerful the A9X actually is, it's much more powerful than an Intel Core M chip, much more powerful than a 2.2 GHz Intel i5 Haswell chip dual core, and it's really similar to a 2.3 GHz Intel Core i7 quad core Haswell CPU. And I even did a 4K editing test just to see how powerful is the A9X chip. And in terms of the export times, it absolutely crushed all of my machines, the Intel Core M, the Intel Core i5, and it was just 2 to 3 seconds slower than the Intel Core i7 quad-core chip inside my 15-inch Retro MacBook Pro. So that thing is just insane in terms of the performance. But the reason why the iPad Pro exists is this, the performance. And because of this, don't expect to see exactly the same A9X chip inside the iPad Air 3. We're most likely going to see an underclocked version of the A9X chip, so a slightly less powerful version. And with that chip, same as on the iPhone 6s, you would be able to edit 4K videos in iMovie on the iPad Air 3. So it's not just going to be faster, but you can actually do more things with it, and that's awesome. As for the RAM, the iPad Air 2 was the first iOS device to come with 2 GB of RAM. And now we also have 2 GB of RAM in the iPhone 6s's, and in the iPad Pro we don't have 2 GB, we actually have 4 GB of RAM. And with the iPad Air 3, we're not expecting to see 4 GB because, again, 4 GB is an iPad Pro exclusive feature, so we're most likely going to see 3 GB of RAM. Now, some of you might say that 3 GB in such a high-end tablet is simply not enough. And I've actually done a really in-depth performance experiment just to see how well iOS deals with the RAM management. So I've compared an iPhone 6 that comes with 1 GB of RAM versus an iPhone 6s which comes with 2 GB of RAM versus a OnePlus 2 which comes with 4 GB of RAM. I launched a lot of apps and I wanted to see which phone can actually hold more apps, more stuff, more things open in the background. And the results were really surprising. So in case you want to check out that experiment, that video I did, I'll leave the link for that in the description box down below, by the way. So yeah, RAM increase is definitely going to happen, especially now, since with iOS 9 on the iPad, we finally have true multitasking. So we have split screen, multi-window, and picture-in-picture. And all of these things require a lot of memory. So that's why these features only work on the iPad Air 2, which has 2 GB of RAM, and on the iPad Mini 4, which also has 2 GB of RAM. So this might be a pretty big reason for Apple to increase the memory, again, from 2 GB, not to 4, but 3. And these were the specs. Now moving on to section number 4, we have the camera. And in terms of the camera, usually tablets, they usually don't have a pretty good camera. I wonder why. But the iPad Air 2 actually had a really good camera for a tablet. So it had an 8 megapixel sensor, f2.4 aperture, 5 element lens. You can even take panoramas of up to 43 megapixels. So yeah, the camera was pretty good for a tablet on the iPad Air 2. And with the next iPad, we're actually expecting to see an even better one. So the sensor will most likely be increased from 8 megapixels to 12 megapixels. And you might ask yourselves, why would they do that? Because it's a tablet. Well, remember when I said that on the A9X chip you can actually edit 4K videos? Well, the iPad Air 2 cannot record 4K videos. Only the iPhone 6s can do that. And to record 4K videos, by the way, you need a camera with a sensor larger than 8.3 megapixels. That's 8.3 is 4K. If you have anything larger than that, you can record 4K videos. And because of this, Apple might actually use the exact same camera that we have in the iPhone 6s. So 12 megapixel sensor, f2.2 aperture, 4K video recording at 30 frames per second, 1080 at 60, 30, and then slow motion of up to 240. And then we're finally going to see an LED flash this time, because we've never had a flash on the back of any iPad. So yeah, the iPad Air 3 will actually be the first iPad with a back-facing camera flash. Speaking of flashes, the iPhone 6s has a front-facing camera flash in a way. It's called Retina Flash, and when you take a photo, the screen lights up, and it also changes its color depending on the environment. So that's a pretty nice feature to have, and we're most likely going to see a Retina Flash in the iPad Air 3 as well. The iPhone 6s also received a pretty big front-facing camera upgrade, from 1.2 megapixels finally to 5. So we're probably going to see exactly the same thing on the iPad Air 3. A 5 megapixel front-facing camera from 1.2 with an f2.2 aperture, so same as on the back, and that will allow you to take up to 720p video. So yeah, the cameras are actually getting some pretty huge improvements, but the question is, would you actually use a tablet, or do you use a tablet for photography? Let me know in the comment section down below. What do you think about this? Taking photos with a tablet in public or not in public? Anyway, what do you think about this? Let me know. Okay, now moving on to section number 5. This is a pretty interesting one, special features. So what exactly do I mean by special features? Well, up until now, everything we've seen with the iPad Air 3 is the same design as the iPad Air 2 and some internal improvements. So this is basically an S model, the S model of the iPads. But with every S model on the iPhone 6s, the iPhone 5s, the iPhone 4s, we've seen a special feature. Siri, Touch ID, 3D Touch, and so on. So what's that special feature going to be when it comes to the iPad Air 2S or the iPad Air 3? Well, the iPad Pro came with a 4-speaker layout. Yeah, the iPad Pro had 4 speakers. Those speakers were really loud and also really smart. 2 of them acted as a subwoofer, and then they would change the rotation depending on how you hold the iPad. So that's on the iPad Pro, and those speakers are coming to the iPad Air 3 as well. So we're finally going to see a really improved speaker system, 2 on the top and 2 on the bottom. And again, they would work in the exact same way as they do on the iPad Pro. So they would adjust the sound depending on how you hold it. Now the second special feature is also coming from the iPad Pro, and that's this smart connector. So the smart connector on the iPad Pro allows you to connect some smart devices, and by smart devices I only mean 2 of them, the iPad Pro smart keyboard and the Logitech keyboard. And even though there are not many accessories available right now, those 2 that are out there, well, you don't need any power or any pairing with those. So you would just connect the keyboards and they would just work. No pairing or power. And that's awesome. So this is coming to the iPad Air 3 as well. And this also means that we're going to see an iPad Air 3 smart keyboard as well. Now the iPad Pro actually came with 2 accessories, the Apple keyboard and the Apple Pencil. And the Apple Pencil is coming to the iPad Air 3 as well. Remember when I talked about the display and I said that the refresh rate is going to be dynamically adjustable? Well, you have the same thing on the iPad Pro. When you use the Apple Pencil, the refresh rate actually increases, and the iPad Pro predicts where the tip of the pencil, the next position of the tip of the pencil will be at. But basically draw it before you draw, and it's really accurate. It feels like you're drawing on a paper, but you're not. Again, in case you want to know more about the Apple Pencil, I've done a really in-depth review just on that, linked here in the description. So the Apple Pencil is definitely coming. I'm not sure if Apple is going to release a different version of the Apple Pencil, Apple Pencil 2, most likely not. Only an iPad Air 3 that supports the Apple Pencil. Speaking of that, I don't think we'll see this with the iPad Mini 5, by the way. I do hope so, but I don't think so. And finally, the last special feature is most likely going to be Touch ID 2.0. So on the iPhone 6s, we have a brand new version of Touch ID. It's called Touch ID 2.0, and it basically works really fast. It's so fast that you basically just touch the home button and it unlocks the phone. It's so fast that it actually skips the notifications. With the iPad Mini 4 and the iPad Pro, you only got Touch ID 1.0. And yeah, Touch ID 2.0 is definitely a strong possibility to see in the iPad Air 3. Not because it's useful, because it's not that useful, but producing 2 different Touch IDs, it's actually more expensive for Apple to produce 2 different types of Touch ID than just one. So in a way, they actually need to do this. Now moving on to the next section, section number 6, we have the battery life. So I haven't said anything about the battery life yet. The iPad Air 2 had an amazing battery life, it lasted for about 10 hours, actually more than 10 hours in some cases. Apple advertises 10 hours of continuous usage, but yeah, in some cases, depending on how you use it, if you just read some books, you definitely can get more than 10 hours. And the iPad Air 2 comes with a 7340 mAh battery, and with the iPad Air 3, we're actually expecting to see a slight increase to something like 7400 or 7500, 7400 most likely. Okay, so when is this thing going to be released? Well, to be honest, everyone, including myself, we were all expecting to see an iPad Air 3 announced in September at the Apple event. But yeah, that never happened. And Apple's actually going to have an event this March, most likely on March the 15th, so less than a month from today. And at that event, they're going to announce the brand new iPhone 6C/iPhone 5 SE, which I covered in the Final Leaks and Rumors video. This video linked in the description in case you want to check it out. So yeah, they're going to announce that. They're going to update the MacBooks as well. Some new Apple Watch bands are coming, by the way, including this black Milanese loop, which just looks insane. And then they're also going to announce the brand new iPad Air 3. But that's just the announcement, so when is it actually going to come out? Well, the actual release date is supposedly going to be the 18th of March, so just 3 days after the announcement. Again, less than a month from today. And in terms of the price and the models, the previous iPads, the baseline model, was 16 gigabytes. Hopefully this year Apple will finally switch to 32 gigabytes as the baseline model and keep 32, 64, and 128. In that case, the baseline model will start from $499 or 399 pounds, and then it will go up depending on the capacity. But there's a slight chance that we'll see another option, another model, another capacity, a 256 gigabyte option. Now, this is not 100% confirmed. This will most likely happen with the iPad Pro, by the way, with the iPad Pro 2 this year, but we might just see this with the iPad Air 3 as well. No idea about the price, but yeah, that would be pretty expensive. In terms of the colors, we're going to get exact same colors as with the iPhone 6s. So space gray, silver, gold, and rose gold finally, because we haven't had a rose gold option with the iPad Air 2 or even the iPad Pro and the Mini. Okay, so I've changed my shirt now, which can only mean one thing, that things are getting serious. So this was everything in terms of the iPad Air 3. Now there have been some more recent rumors that suggest that the new iPad Air 3 won't actually be called an iPad Air 3, but an iPad Pro Mini instead, or simply a 9.7-inch iPad Pro. Okay, so it's a different name, and that's it. Well, no, not really. If this is the case, then there are going to be quite a lot of differences. First off, in terms of the pros, we're going to see 4 gigabytes of RAM along with an Apple A9X GPU, non-overclocked this time. So yeah, in terms of the performance, things are looking pretty good so far. So same performance as on the 12.9 inches iPad Pro, and that's a pretty good thing. As for the cons, well, there are quite a lot of them. First off, if Apple is simply going to introduce an iPad Pro, an 9.7-inch iPad Pro, and iPad Pro Mini, well, they're most likely going to keep the iPad Air 2 in stock. So what does this mean? Well, it means that the iPad Pro, the 9.7-inch iPad Pro, is actually going to be more expensive than the iPad Air 2. And again, if this is the case, you can say goodbye to all of those camera improvements, Touch ID 2.0, and everything I've talked about in terms of those special features. So no camera improvements, no Touch ID 2.0, and definitely no display improvements. Just a smaller iPad Pro, a 9.7-inch iPad Pro with Apple Pencil support and Apple Keyboard support. And I really wanted to cover both cases, both the iPad Air 3 and the iPad Pro Mini, the 9.7-inch iPad Pro, because we're definitely going to see one of them next month. But let me know, what do you guys think? Let me know in the comment section down below if you prefer seeing an iPad Air 3 or an iPad Pro Mini, a 9.7-inch iPad Pro. Definitely let me know in the comment section down below which one of those two seems more appealing to you. Let me know. I'll definitely be covering the new iPad as soon as it comes out, so definitely stay tuned for that. Also feel free to subscribe if you want to see more videos like this one, more Final Leaks and Rumors videos. So if you missed the previous episodes, I left all of these linked in the description box down below, by the way. Also feel free to give this video a huge like if you have enjoyed it. It took a really long time to make, so every single like is really appreciated. And also let me know in the comments down below, again, what are your top 5 features, top 5 favorite features that you would like to see in the next iPad? Either the iPad Pro Mini or the iPad Air 3. Top 5 features. Let me know. Again. But yeah, this has been pretty much it. Don't forget to turn on notifications on my channel if you are a subscriber on both desktop and mobile. On mobile by simply clicking that bell icon next to my channel so that you're notified as soon as I upload a brand new epic video. But yeah, this has been it. This was a really long video, definitely one of the longest Final Leaks and Rumors videos I've ever done. So yeah, if you've made it to this point, leave a comment again down below saying I've made it to the end of this really long video. So yeah, thank you all for watching this video. I'm Daniel, and I'll see you guys in my next one. Son of Tech, signing out. Cheers.